Week 4 of the college football season has arrived. We are already past the halfway point in the month of September, and we are in store for a very big week in college football. We have four top 25 matchups, and one of those matchups is on Friday night. The seven games on the docket this week: Illinois and Nebraska, Michigan State and Boston College, North Carolina State and Clemson, Georgia Tech and Louisville, USC and Michigan, Utah and Oklahoma State, and concluding the week 4 predictions with the game of the week, Tennessee and Oklahoma. I went 7-0 in my picks last week. Can I do it for a second week in a row? Without further ado, let's get to the week 4 college football predictions. Illinois and Nebraska, a top 25 matchup that will be played on Friday night. And Friday night will be a special night for Nebraska, as it will mark their 400th consecutive home sellout. I said in my week 2 college football takeaways, which, by the way, you can see those, but they're not videos, they're YouTube shorts. They're in the YouTube shorts category. I said there was a strong chance Nebraska enters the Ohio State game 7-0. And I have felt that way for months, ever since I looked at their schedule week to week. I felt like Nebraska, there's a strong possibility they enter Ohio State 7-0. And when you look at Nebraska's schedule after this week, Purdue on the road, which I think Nebraska is going to have zero troubles with Purdue. At home against Rutgers, it's their homecoming game. I have not been impressed with Rutgers at all this season. And the game before the Ohio State game at Indiana, which Indiana I feel like is a very underrated team. I felt like they'd be very underrated going into the season. And looking at Indiana's schedule, once we see Nebraska and Indiana in a few weeks, it's very possible both of those teams will be undefeated going into that game. Can Illinois match Nebraska's physicality? Can Illinois get to the Brett Bielema style of football that has given a team like Nebraska fits and frustrations in the past by running the football early and often and running the ball efficiently? Nebraska allowed 145 rushing yards to Northern Iowa last week, which, if you're Illinois, that is something you need to exploit and take advantage of. Illinois is 33rd in total defense, while Nebraska is 23rd in total defense. Nebraska is 8th in scoring defense, only allowing an average of 6.67 points per game, which you may not think it's impressive when you think about two or three opponents have been UTEP and Northern Iowa. But a Colorado offense, a high-powered Colorado offense that is must-see TV, they were held to just 10 points by this Nebraska defense. And Patrick Mahomes' doppelganger, Dylan Raiola, is off to a very good start in his college career. He did throw his first interception last week, but that is a learning experience for him. As other than that, he has just played absolutely perfectly. The fact that Nebraska just they're starting to return to the identity that they were known for back in the days, and that's running the football early and often. And I am going to pick Nebraska to win this game by at least 14 points. I said the same thing against Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and I did get some interesting comments about it. But then Nebraska, they not only won against Colorado, but by at least 14 points. I think that's the case again. I just feel like Illinois will not be able to match Nebraska's physicality. I feel like they have shown that they are a very physical team. And when Nebraska is playing like this, they can win against just about every single team in college football. But I don't really want to go far off track there. But Nebraska, they're a very strong team, and they're going to have a very strong season, and the 400th consecutive home sellout game will be a very special one. Michigan State and Boston College. I personally think this is one of the more underrated matchups of the week. And I do think this matchup would get a little more attention if there wasn't 4 top 25 matchups this week. I think there might be some people that are surprised that this is one of the 7 games on the docket for me this week. But Michigan State, they are off to a 3-0 start in the Jonathan Smith era. And Boston College, they have been a team that has flown under the radar this season. Their season started with an upset win on the road against Florida State on Labor Day night. And last week, they had a very good start against Missouri on the road last week. But they fell just short of pulling off a second top 10 upset on the road this season, a 27-21 loss. They were in that game from start to finish. A big key for me this week for Boston College is to play clean football, as what really cost Boston College last week against Missouri was 2 interceptions from Thomas Castellanos. Michigan State, they are currently 23rd in run defense. So I'm very curious to see if Thomas Castellanos is going to have the ability to extend plays in this matchup. And a big reason why I have this matchup as one of my 7 is because I think this is going to be a very close and intense game. As in recent memory, Jonathan Smith, he has done a really great job in coaching in games that are the games that are very attention worthy. And I'm saying attention worthy as ranked matchups or big time opponents. And this is Michigan State's first big test of the 2024 season. And it's a team that has flown under the radar this season. Bill O'Brien is doing great things so far with Boston College. And if you look at the games that Oregon State played last season, they may have not won a lot of games against big time competition last season, but they made the games really close. And one that sticks out to me the most is Washington late in the season. As if maybe 1 or 2 things go differently in that game, Oregon State very likely upsets Washington, and it would have caused more of a ripple effect in the college football playoff race. Now, which Michigan State team is going to show up for this game is a big question, because that's been a big question for Michigan State, not only so far in this Jonathan Smith era, as their season opened up with a gritty 16-10 win against Florida Atlantic at home on a Friday night. But Michigan State historically, they haven't done well, like stats and numbers wise, against non-conference competition, but they have still gotten the win. I'm going to pick Boston College to win this game, but I do think Jonathan Smith, I think he does do a well enough job to keep Michigan State in this game from start to finish. So I do think Boston College, I do think last week's loss, with how they lost, they were so close. I think that's still weighing on their minds. And I do think the line for this game, the spread for this game, I think is Boston College by an exact touchdown. I think Michigan State keeps that to within 7. I do think if that spread goes up to 7.5, I do think there's value in taking Michigan State at a plus 7.5. But I do think Boston College, they do win this game. But whoever wins this game, it's going to be a gritty performance. NC State and Clemson. Now, the spread for this game right now is Clemson by nearly 3 touchdowns. And the reason why that is for multiple reasons. One, because NC State, they have struggled against West Carolina and Louisiana Tech so far this season, and they completely disappointed against Tennessee and they lost, I want to say 51-10, if I remember correctly. Plus, experienced quarterback Grayson McCall will not be playing this game as he is injured, and they'll be starting freshman quarterback CJ Bailey. And also, Clemson is off of a bye week. Before that bye week, Clemson, they had a much needed victory over Appalachian State where it was not a game at all. I think if I remember correctly, Clemson won that game. I think they had 66 points in that game, but it was a victory that Clemson really needed. They really got some frustration out after losing to Georgia the way they did, 34-3 in the season opener. But despite losing 34-3, Clemson, they were in that game mainly because of their defense. Their defense did everything they could, and that was a big key for me in that game that week, was how long could Clemson's defense keep Clemson in the game. And they did better than I thought they would, because leading up into that game, there was news about how Clemson was going to be shorthanded in the secondary, and I felt like that game would be over in the first quarter, but Clemson, they were in it at halftime, but then the game started to get away from them as Georgia, they just got better and better as that game went along. And this game, it feels pretty self-explanatory. I have nothing against NC State as a program or the NC State fan base at all, but I just don't think that they have much of a chance this game, but they still do any given Saturday. But I just think with all these things lining up in Clemson's favor, I just don't know how much of a game this is. Even though in the past when these two teams have faced off against each other, it has been close nearly every time, at least since 2016. It's been close between these two more often than not. I just think this is a case of Clemson, with them being off of a bye week. They had their confidence back before the bye week against a program like Appalachian State, who has a history of upsetting Power 4 teams. I think Clemson is going to win this game, but I don't exactly know how handily it'll be. I think it'll be relatively easier than it has been for Clemson in years past against this NC State team. But either way, I am going to pick Clemson to win this game. Georgia Tech and Louisville, both quarterbacks in this matchup, they have played very clean football so far this season. Haynes King has only thrown one interception this season, and Tyler Shuck, he has not thrown an interception yet this season. And Haynes King, him only throwing one interception so far, it does stick out to me, because in the Week 0 video, when it was Florida State and Georgia Tech, I talked about how I wanted to see Haynes King decrease the amount of interceptions that he throws, as he had 16 interceptions last season, which was the most in the ACC conference. And so far, he's only thrown one. He's also completed over 76% of his passes, and Georgia Tech's offensive line has not allowed a single sack all season long. I will admit I have not done a whole lot of research on Louisville compared to other teams. So I was really surprised to see that Louisville was a 10-point favorite in this game. When I was going through the matchups this week, I thought, okay, Louisville, they are ranked 19th in the country. Georgia Tech, they were ranked, but they're not ranked at the moment. But Georgia Tech was portrayed as a team that could be a sleeper in the ACC. We saw them upset Florida State in Ireland. We did see them have an opportunity to have an epic comeback against Syracuse. They just couldn't set up an opportunity for a defiant last stand, and they lost a very close game. But Louisville, they are 25th in run defense, which Georgia Tech's, the philosophy they have in their offense, it's frustrating for a lot of teams where they just use up as much of the game clock as possible. And that was a big reason why they were able to upset Florida State. After Florida State scored the game tying touchdown, Georgia Tech, they're able to run the clock out and set up the game winning field goal. Louisville is ninth in rushing offense, averaging 263 rushing yards per game. I think a big key for me in this game is, can Haynes King, can he force Louisville to win against him in the air and on the ground? Because Louisville, they allowed 101 rushing yards to Jacksonville State quarterback Tyler Huff. I am going to pick Louisville to win this game. However, I just feel like Georgia Tech's philosophy offensively, and Georgia Tech, they have been one of the more inconsistent teams in college football in the last couple of years. As last year we saw Georgia Tech have top 10 wins over Miami and North Carolina, but then we also saw them lose to Bowling Green. We've seen them upset Florida State. They lost to Syracuse a couple weeks later. Perhaps maybe they go on the road as a double-digit underdog and they pull off an upset. I would not be surprised that's what Georgia Tech, they have done in the past couple of seasons. I would not be surprised if Georgia Tech won this game outright. But I think worst case scenario, Georgia Tech, they at least cover that 10. As the way Georgia Tech has been playing football, their philosophy, I just can't see them losing this game by more than 10 points. But I do think Louisville wins, but I don't think they win by double digits. USC and Michigan. USC is off of a bye week, and they go on the road to take on Michigan. Michigan, they did get the win last week, but it wasn't the kind of win that Michigan would have wanted or their fans necessarily wanted. They just needed a game where they had to return to their identity, their style of football they've been known for the last few seasons. Khalil Mullings, he had 153 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in the game last week. And I am wondering what is up with Donovan Edwards this season, as he only has 150 rushing yards and a touchdown on 36 carries. And it's really surprising, is I felt like going to the season, Donovan Edwards, he was in for a stellar season for Michigan, as he was going to finally be the starting running back, as he had been overshadowed by Blake Corum, and now, by the looks of it, he's going to start to be getting overshadowed by Khalil Mullings. Michigan tight end Colston Loveland, he is injured and his status for the game is unknown. It is an arm injury. Michigan did announce that Alex Orji is going to start in this game on Saturday. They are benching Davis Warren after Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions in the game last week. But I am wondering why Michigan announced this already. I feel like if they would have waited to announce it until later on in the week, I felt like it would have played more into their favor. But now USC has the edge, knowing, well, they have more of an edge in this game, more of an advantage in this game, knowing on Monday that Alex Orji is going to be starting in this game, as Lincoln Riley, he does have experience with mobile quarterbacks. And one thing going into the season was going to be how much improved USC's defense is going to be, going from Alex Grinch to DeAnton Lynn. And USC so far in their first couple games this season, they have been really impressive. But how does Michigan pull off this upset? I feel like if Michigan, if they're able to run the football efficiently, like they have been in the past, and keep USC's offense on the sidelines, I do think Michigan has a chance to win. Or if they can just establish early momentum in the game and get your crowd into it, as Michigan is a very tough place to play for a lot of teams, but Texas, they did make it look easy a couple weeks ago. However, I think that Texas is in for another very special season, and I feel like Texas right now is deserving of being the number one team in the country, but that is besides the point. I thought about picking Michigan to win this game. I really did. And I felt like if they would have waited until later in the week, or if they would have just had a depth chart that said starting quarterback Davis Warren or Alex Orji, USC would have had to prepare for both quarterbacks in that game. But now they know it's Alex Orji, and they have all the time in the world in practice this week to prepare for him. And I'm going to pick USC to win this game, but if Michigan were to win this game, it's going to be off of them being able to run the football efficiently. And if Alex Orji, if he can make throws in this game when it matters. But I'm going to pick USC to win this. And I do feel like USC, they are a prime candidate, a sleeper in this Big Ten, and a very stacked Big Ten by adding in USC, Oregon, and even Washington in the picture, even though Washington did lose last week. But I am picking the Trojans. Maybe Michigan will surprise me and pull off the upset, but it's not looking too likely in my opinion. But we'll see. Utah and Oklahoma State. For Utah, quarterback Cam Rising is injured again. In the Baylor game a couple weeks ago, he sustained a hand injury. Utah head coach Kyle Whittingham, he did say that it doesn't appear to be too serious, but they kept him out of the game last week. And instead, they turned to Isaac Wilson, brother of NFL quarterback Zach Wilson, and he went 20 for 33, 239 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and 1 interception. Oklahoma State coach Mike Gundy, he said whether the quarterback for this game on Saturday is going to be Cam Rising or Isaac Wilson, the preparation for the game, it does not matter. And Oklahoma State last week, they did get a productive win against Tulsa on the road last week in a game that I felt like they personally needed after the emotional double overtime victory they had against Arkansas the week prior, where they allowed 648 total yards of offense to Arkansas. And I'm wondering, where is Ollie Gordon? As Ollie Gordon, he has been fairly disappointing this season so far, as he only had 17 carries against Arkansas for 49 yards and 17 carries against Tulsa last week for 41 yards. I do feel like perhaps that they are just saving Ollie Gordon for conference play, as this is the first conference game for Oklahoma State. I do think that's what the deal was, because Ollie Gordon, he did get a lot of carries last season, and I talked about how Oklahoma State, they were undefeated in games going into the Arkansas game a couple weeks ago, when Ollie Gordon had at least 20 to 25 carries in the games. But they are resting him a little bit, I do feel like. And I do think this week we're going to see Ollie Gordon carry the ball at least 25 times this game, because I do think he's been saved up by Oklahoma State for Big 12 conference play. And Oklahoma State, they did open up as a 1.5 favorite, but now it is shifted to Utah being favored by a 1.5. And I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to win this game, to upset Utah, as I do think this is going to be a breakout game for Ollie Gordon. Because if you just look at the trend, 17 carries in the last 2 games apiece. When last season, when you look at Ollie Gordon, he was getting at least 25 carries in a majority of the games. And Oklahoma State, they are a very experienced team. They brought a lot of productivity back from 2023, which makes them a serious contender to win the Big 12 championship. And we could potentially see this matchup once again in December for the Big 12 championship game. But I do think this matchup, Oklahoma State, I do think they pick up a decisive victory behind a big performance from Ollie Gordon and experienced quarterback Alan Bowman, especially if Isaac Wilson is the starting quarterback for this game compared to experienced quarterback Cam Rising. Closing things out with the game of the week, Tennessee and Oklahoma. For Oklahoma, it is their first SEC conference game, and what a matchup for the Sooners. Going up against a Tennessee team that has dominated so far on both sides of the ball in all three games this season. I get the magnitude of two of their opponents so far, but you have to give all the credit in the world to winning against NC State the way that they did, being dominant from start to finish. And I have been sold on Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava so far this season. I do feel like at the very least he should be second in the Heisman race behind Miami quarterback Cam Ward, as those two so far this season, they have been something else. But I do think if Nico Iamaleava, if he has a phenomenal performance on the road against Oklahoma this Saturday night, I do think he could move up to number one in the Heisman race, in my opinion. As Tennessee, they have scored 63.7 points per game on average, first in the FBS. They're also third in the FBS in scoring defense, only allowing an average of 4.33 points per game. Tennessee running back Dylan Sampson, he has 357 rushing yards on the season, ninth in the FBS so far. While Oklahoma, they have struggled in the past couple of weeks against Houston and Tulane. When you look at the final score of the Tulane and Oklahoma game, you could really think that Oklahoma, they got a decisive win, they got a productive win, but Oklahoma, they struggled in that game as they did not make the game official. They didn't and have that game won until the very end. As Tulane, they've been a very gritty team these past couple of weeks with competitive games against Kansas State and Oklahoma. And I want to set the storyline for this game on Saturday night. 10 years ago, Bob Stoops, he parted ways with his offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator he parted ways with just happened to be Josh Heupel, now the Tennessee head coach, the former Oklahoma quarterback. He won Oklahoma a national championship, and now he is coaching against the Sooners in Oklahoma's first SEC conference game. It's also an emotional return not only for Josh Heupel, but also Tennessee offensive coordinator Joey Halzle, as he is also a former Oklahoma quarterback. And in this game, I do feel that as much as this is going to be a big test for Tennessee, as they're going on the road to take on an SEC team in Oklahoma, even though they're a newly SEC team, where the SEC, it just means more. I was wondering how ready Oklahoma would be for the SEC, but with the way Tennessee's been playing, the way Oklahoma's been playing, you can argue that maybe the game could favor Oklahoma's direction, considering that they've had to win games. They've had to play all 60 minutes in games compared to Tennessee. But I just feel like this Tennessee offense, it's just hard to pick against until you see them really struggle in a game. And I did say a couple weeks ago, I was looking forward to seeing how Tennessee would match up against the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world, and even the Oklahomas of the world, even though Oklahoma, they did struggle against Houston, now they struggled against Tulane. I think Tennessee has a big night in Norman, and it's a big return for Josh Heupel and Joey Halzle. And if Nico Iamaleava does, if he has a big game, I think he could move into number one as far as the Heisman race is concerned and pass Cam Ward. I'm going to pick Tennessee to win this game. I just I'm just having a hard time picking against Tennessee right now with the way they've been compared to Oklahoma. And that will do it for my week 4 college football predictions. If there was a game I did not predict this week that you would like my thoughts on, please leave in the comment section and I will give you a response. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. The week 3 NFL predictions video will be out tomorrow. For those of you that do tune in for that. For those of you that only tune in for the college football picks, enjoy the games this Saturday. Or should I say enjoy the games this weekend, as there are some Friday night games, including Illinois and Nebraska. I'll see you next week for those of you that only tune in for the college football picks. For the people that tune in for the NFL picks as well, I will see you tomorrow. Until next time.